Hi, and welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show, the show for animal training and behaviour nerds, where I, Ryan Cartledge, interview the world's most proficient animal training and behaviour geeks. We're absolutely thrilled and grateful to have you here with us today. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on whatever you're listening to this on so that you don't miss a single episode. Each episode of this show is brought to you on behalf of the ATA membership. And if you like the conversations in this episode, then you're invited to continue them with like-minded behaviour nerds within the membership area, which you can find out more about at www.animaltrainingacademy.com. You'll get access to twice monthly live web classes, the back catalogue of previous web class replays, plus a huge library of videos and projects to help problem solve your training challenges. Plus, we're a sociable bunch with an exclusive private Facebook group and forum areas. It's like a Netflix social media platform for animal behaviour geeks. But we will start today's episode where we'll be talking to one Alexis Davison. Alexis has been a professional dog trainer since 2001 and began developing her program UnChased in 2012 to help clients and students seeking solutions to their dogs' chasing behaviours. Since then, she has helped countless dog lovers curb their dogs' chasing behaviours and shared her innovative approach with dog training professionals worldwide. Alexis is a nationally accredited dog behavioural trainer with a certificate in dog behavioural training, a Karen Pryor Academy certified training partner, and an internationally certified professional dog trainer through the Certification Council for Professional Dog Trainers. Alexis is also a Karen Pryor Academy faculty member, charged with teaching the KPA Dog Trainer Professional Program in Australia and New Zealand, and being a coach for KPA's Dog Trainer Comprehensive course. She is also a dog business consultant. She regularly speaks at dog training conferences, seminars, and workshops, sharing her experience and unique UnChased program with fellow dog training professionals. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome Alexis Davison to the show today, who is patiently waiting by in South Australia. Alexis, thank you so much for taking the time to come and hang out with us at Animal Training Academy.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Ryan. It's great to be here.
It's my absolute pleasure. And for everyone listening, Alexis was my faculty member teaching the KPA professional program in New Zealand. Probably one of the weirder cohorts you've had, Alexis. We started in 2019 and finished last year.
Wouldn't necessarily say weirder. I would say it was probably the longest class.
I remember our cohort was the first one to do Zoom. Zoom format.
Correct. I was due to be flying to Wellington 10 days before the borders shut. So, yes, I didn't make it.
So we got to do our 10-part chain.
And I tried again in 2021.
Oh, you did, didn't you? Yeah,
I did.
We had it booked 3 times before we finally
Oh, dear. And the border kept on shutting.
But that was fun. It was fun to experiment and be part of that quick pivoting from Karen Pryor Academy, which had to happen at the time, and be supportive to our colleagues and peers as we're all going through, as the world was the stress of figuring out what the heck was happening.
Yeah, it was a very stressful and hopefully unusual time.
But now it's over forever, so let's move on. Let's dive straight into our first question today, Alex. For this one, I was hoping you could please take everyone listening back to where you first started, back to where you first learned about animal training, about positive reinforcement, and would love to hear some stories from your journey.
Thanks, Ryan. It was really interesting sort of thinking in preparation for the podcast, and certainly going back in time and many memories, many happy memories, and very thankful in reflecting on all the people that have mentored and supported me throughout my journey. So I may get a little bit emotional throughout the podcast. But interestingly, my background is working with people. I was in the disability services is where I started out when I was 17. supporting people in the community who had an intellectual disability. And then I did some travelling overseas, and I worked in London, I worked in Edinburgh, and did what a lot of Australians and New Zealanders do, and spent 7 years overseas working and travelling. And then when I came back to Australia, eventually I made my way back to South Australia, where I bought a house, and I thought, I've stopped travelling, I can get a dog. And so that was back in 1997. And so I got a dog, which was just, back in the day, was just sort of the newspaper. And then there were at that time, the puppy classes sort of weren't available, they weren't a thing. And it was obedience clubs, so local community, volunteer-led community clubs. And at that time, the recommendation was you started training at 6 months, because that was the age that, it was okay to pop a check chain on a dog. And so when he turned 6 months, off we went down to a local club and we started training. And I went through sort of the grades as you did then. You sort of, every sort of month or so had a little graduation, and off you went into the next grade. 5 grades. And when we got to grade 5, that was sort of the end of the grading, and it was like, a lot of my classmates were going along to do agility classes, which were also offered at the club. And a lot of my students were like, come on, Alexis, come along, it'll be fun. So we moved over from the obedience classes to the agility classes. And I don't know if any of your members have ever tried teaching agility using a check chain, but it's a fairly challenging task. And so when we got to weave poles, Hamish, who was my dog, he was a Akita cross, and he was not picking up the concept of going through the weave poles. And I just felt often what would happen is the instructors would take him from me because he was an Akita cross. He was, of course, stubborn, and therefore I needed to, have more force used to show him, how it was all done. And so I just didn't feel, I certainly wasn't having fun. I didn't think Hamish was having fun. And I just thought, well, there's no point in us doing this if it's not fun. But I also thought there had to be another way to train. It just didn't seem to make a lot of sense to me with what we were doing. And I think somewhere along the line, and I'm sure this has happened to a lot of other people, is, here I am, working in an industry where we were doing already ABA. We were already supporting people in a way which was, looking at behaviour, looking at the antecedents, looking at the consequences, and the two didn't twig. But obviously somewhere in my brain I thought, there's got to be another way to teach weave poles. So at the time I was working as a coordinator for an organisation which supported family carers. So I was working right across a whole range of groups, but we had computers and this was 97, 98, and we had the internet had just come into being, folks, in Australia, into sort of, offices and for very few people at the time, but more commonly into people's homes. And so I hopped on to the internet and, was looking about how to train weave poles and agility. And I started coming across, because of back in the days of listservs and names like Helix Fairweather, I remember seeing, at the time, and finding articles on how to train weave poles or how to train this obstacle or that obstacle. And they kept mentioning this thing called a clicker. I thought, what is that? So then I'd have to go and find, this was back in the days before Google, so it was a longer process to find information. And I found that this clicker was actually this little device thing. And so I found a place that sold clickers, which was Sunshine Books, which is of course Karen Pryor Academy these days, as well as part of that group. And so I ordered 2 clickers, little box clickers from Sunshine Books in America, and they were $25 at the time for 2 clickers, which was very expensive. And along with that came little Karen Pryor booklet on how to, clicker training your dog. And I had my articles and I eventually got my clickers and I sat down and just started mucking around with clickers, and the advice at the time from Karen Pryor was train something completely new, just work on something you haven't done before. And so I think I worked on a rollover or something like that, and I thought, wow, this is pretty good. So I set up some weave poles in my back garden, and I found a method which was ultimately it was shaping. And so I just had my little 2 weave poles, and this is where I can get a little bit teary. So if my voice breaks, that's what's going on.
We're grateful, and I'm speaking when I say we, I'm speaking for myself and the audience. We're grateful for you being vulnerable for us. I can see this is hard, and we can hear this is hard. So firstly, gratitude for being willing to go there, and this is a judgment-free place, and crying is okay. It's just part of being human and the emotions we feel. Obviously, you feel really strongly about this, so take your time. But we all want to hear what you have to say.
And I guess for me, the image is still so strong in my mind. And so ultimately, Hamish goes through the weave poles, and eventually, of course, he's doing 12 weave poles, which was the beginner's sort of novice plan. And this is the image that gets me, is I swear, he looked around at me and, talk about the light bulb moment. But it was like why didn't you just do this in the beginning? Just a real understanding for him of exactly what I wanted, what the behaviour was. And that was it. I've never, ever used a check chain again. And I went back down to the club, but he just always had a flat collar on. And we did trial. He went through and did his first trial. He got what we called a double clear round, and he really excelled. He got his title really quickly and all those sorts of things. And the interesting thing for me is I actually haven't ever trialled agility again, because I got all caught up in teaching and learning, and then I did actually go back a number of years ago, but to watch some trials, but things hadn't really changed a lot, and I wasn't comfortable in that environment. So I again thought, well, this is not my happy place. So where I went from there was I wanted to learn more, and because of my experience, as you can tell, here we are sort of 6 years later, was so emotional for me that I really wanted to learn more. And I just thought, gosh, if other people knew about this, just how amazing this way of training is, how quicker it is to get an understanding, how much happier, Hamish was, but I was too, that the frustration obviously for him and for me in terms of working on a method which for me and him just wasn't effective. And so I then was looking around to think, well, how can I learn more about this? And so at the time there was a course offered by the Delta Society of Australia, which was the Certificate 4 in dog behavioural training, and that was, so I enrolled in that and I did the intake, which started in 2001, and we went, so Hamish came with me, it was in Sydney, and he was the dog that I actually did the course with. And so then from there you had to set up classes as was part of the course. And so then I hooked up with a woman called Gil Rogers at the time, which she's now Gil Rogers. I've actually done very well to switch back to her, the name she's using now. And she really was my first mentor. So I was, doing classes with her. She's now a nose work instructor and has come back into the industry and doing wonderful things in that area. And so, I was very fortunate early on to have a mentor. She also had an Aussie Shepherd, and I then, because I was interested in agility, facility, you know, and I've sort of gone off looking for a different breed, sillily, because, of course, you know, I mean, I had this wonderful dog who was doing really well, but I don't know, there was still this thing about, you know, different breeds. But having said that, I adore Aussie Shepherds, and, you know, I've now had four of them, and they are a fabulous breed that I enjoy living with. But I was very fortunate early on to have a very good mentor, and really from there established Scholars in Collars in 2002, and began, you know, running my own business. So, Ryan, that's how it all started.
Thanks again for sharing all of that, and like I said, being brave and sharing the vision you said you had in your mind. Can I ask what makes that so emotional for you? Is it guilt for what you did before that?
I think there is probably, yes, I think there's definitely some of that, you know, in terms of people that you think, wow, why didn't I see this sooner? I mean, I think in some ways, well, you know, at least I saw it 12 months in. But I think it was it was the way we did things, you know, as in people can still do this. You know, my parents, we had dogs when we were growing up, and it was how you trained. Everyone went off, you got a check chain, you went off to your local club. You know, we had a dog training book when I was a kid, which was Barbara Woodhouse, you know, famous for, some people remember, Wookiees. But it was and so I think it was just at that time, from my upbringing, the way we trained our dogs, and it was then the community norm, I guess, of this is what you did. There weren't other training options readily accessible to me or you know, in the country at the time. And so I think it was just falling into that. It was what was done without, I mean, eventually, you know, for me, it was like, I'm not comfortable with this, and this seems sort of weird way to do things, that sent me off searching. But yeah, maybe I think, wow, why didn't I see this sooner? You know, just following the crowd sort of thing. And I think what is really nice now is that there are not only more options for people, you know, there are lots of training options available. And I think what I particularly am delighted about is that there are children's programs. So, you know, I was listening to your podcast with Bex Taxa, and to have programs available for children, you know, starting the generations where we're educating them around learning and behaviour and using positive reinforcement, and the power of that, not only for people, but, you know, in our lives with animals. And so I think that's wonderful. And, you know, one of the things that I still remember from, you know, early on in the pandemic was going online with our Scholars in Collars classes and having emails from people saying, oh, wow, this is great. You know, I did your classes when I was a kid with my parents, and, you know, now my dog can be a scholar too, you know, because we're in Melbourne, or, you know, be in a different state. And so I think for me, that's always nice. We've had lots of students come through who came to scholars classes with their parents when they were kids, and that's now their norm, is that they're using positive reinforcement as their go-to option because that's normal for them. And I think that is wonderful that we have, that I've seen that change. And, you know, of course, you know, more you know, to have this just as, you know, the way everyone sort of goes about things would be wonderful. But there has been so much change in the 26, 27 years or whatever that I've, you know, been, have had a dog in my life in this personal, intimate way. And so I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's an approximation worth celebrating. You just connected a dot for me that I've been thinking about this week, is that we are obviously living in a great tragedy with regards to the prong collars and the shock collars that get used. And you just shared the difference between when you got started and when you've had your first dog, and maybe what someone in your position but in 2003 might experience. But it is an approximation worth celebrating, because really these kids coming up, and then these kids having kids, and then those kids having kids, this is a generational challenge, and we're not going to be alive when it's more norm than unnorm, or all of the shock collars and prong collars are going to be gone completely. Like, this is a generational thing. So having these groups of kids come up, it's an approximation that totally should be focused on and totally should be celebrated, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And I think sometimes it's easy for us to forget the amount of change that has happened in that time. And the fact now that if you were looking at how to train something, there is so much more information out there on different methods, and it's so much easier now for everyone to go out and buy a clicker than it was back then. And so there is more information, and I think we can, we just keep going and we keep sharing and we keep, demonstrating by example and having people become curious about, oh gosh, that's a bit different. I haven't seen that before. And I think that a large thing for me is just seeing the change in emotion of animals when they are trained using positive reinforcement. That there's an emotional difference there, and I think that's maybe what gets me is just that look on his face. Just him literally turning around. Like, I swear, if he could have speak, I think he would have swore a little bit. Like, why didn't you just do this before? This makes so much sense to me now.
Well, I think you're in potentially a more powerful place to teach now because you have that experience. I was fortunate in so much as I went straight into positive reinforcement and never went down that route of using aversives. And I didn't start with dogs. I started with birds. So bit of a different journey, but I am I'm weird. It's weird, but there's a little bit of like jealousy that I don't have that experience base to know and resonate with what you're saying on the same level you can, and therefore leverage that to my ability now as a teacher and disseminator of information. So I totally understand. Well, I can think back to my parrot at university and feel guilt for the way I handled him and for how I managed him. And I can be grateful for that. But I think there's power in that. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, it's interesting that obviously, there's a lot of discussion, frequently around, the use of aversives and, working or talking to people who use aversives. And I think for me, I because I'm, what they call a crossover trainer, I do think about, well, if I was living in this, like if this was now and I had my first dog and I went along to a local club because, like I say, that was the norm of what you did when, as my upbringing, how would I feel? If people were negative towards me and judging me because I was using a check chain? And I think that, obviously I'm as passionate as your community about using positive reinforcement, but it does help me to be more measured and understanding when I'm interacting with people, whether there's, students or other trainers, because I think their experiences are different, and we can share and we can be welcoming and we can share our knowledge and we can, I always like, Laura von Hardenbach-Bohr says, shut up and show off. Let's demonstrate, let's also be there, but let's have open communication.
It's an important topic, and one we're going to be talking about actually in episodes after Alexis's episodes with Matt Beisner, who I know, who has been lucky enough to connect with Michael Shikashio and been influenced by him, and he's going to share about what it felt like to be judged before that. And looking forward to that episode. Hey, your story shares similarities with lots of stories on this show, and so much as people weren't initially exposed to positive reinforcement, and then a little bit different in your case, and then for a lot of people, Don't Shoot the Dog showed up in their life and everything changed. For you,
that was the second book I bought. So once I got my little clicker training for dogs, which was just like a how-to, I bought Don't Shoot the Dog. It was my next read.
Well, I just want to pay tribute to Karen, because the amount of times that narrative has played out in this podcast and how ripple-making that book was, is, and continues to be. It deserves a moment in this podcast episode to pause, I think, and just pay tribute to that amazing world-changing human. World-changing, I would go so far as to say world-changing.
I would definitely agree with that. And may I also say, well done to Karen Pryor for having a website so early on. because who knows where I would have ended up.
Yeah, you and many others. And I'm curious, did you ever meet Karen? And share with us, how did you become a faculty member of the KPA Academy?
I did. I have met Karen a couple of times, and how did I meet? So when I was 2007, I think, was the first time I went to the US. So as you can see, I sort of went on, I finished one course and was like, okay, I was wanting to know so much more. And here in Australia, we had at that time, the APDT had just started, I think, when I was doing my Delta course, and they would have a conference once a year in Sydney, and we would have one speaker for a weekend workshop. And then I also became a very frequent shopper at Dogwise, and amongst the Dogwise little information you get when you bought your books was information about the APDT conference in America. And I would think, wow, they have all these speakers, it's over like 5 days, it's amazing. And when I sort of looked at really the costs at the time, like air travel was expensive. It's back to where it was. It's expensive again now. But to travel to Sydney and to spend time in a hotel there and all those sorts of things, ultimately there wasn't a great deal of difference really for me to go to America. And I thought, 5 days, so many speakers. And so I decided I'd go to America. And when I was doing that, I'd spoken to people Gail Perry, who was running the Delta course at the time, and said, look, I'm going to go to America. Is there anyone, I'm going to decide to do a bit of a study tour whilst I'm there. I'll go visit some people, and I just want to see how things are done, like just get some different ideas and just see some other things, because it still was a pretty small movement here. And, I had fairly limited experience at seeing how other people's classes were being run or what was happening. And so Gail Perry suggested that I should contact Terry Ryan and, see if I could catch up with her when I was there. And I caught up with other people too. Like I remember going to see Grisha Stewart's classes when she was teaching in Seattle. So I organised this little trip, and I have to say, wow, I was absolutely blown away by Americans. Like, they were so hospitable. They were so nice. People they were, so welcoming and so friendly, and just were amazing. And so what I soon discovered, because I met obviously lots of people at the APDT conference, they say, oh, come and, let us know when you're in Seattle or whatever, and we'll catch up. What I soon learnt was, if I wanted any time to myself, I just needed to let them know after I'd actually arrived, so I could have a couple of hours to myself, because they would be picking me up from the airport. And, it was just, I was blown away, absolutely blown away. And of course, Terry Ryan was one of those people who said, yeah, come up for a few days. And I stayed in a hotel, but, her and Bill, they'd pick me up from my hotel room and went out for dinner, and, allowed me to watch classes, and so generous and kind. And I had this most amazing experience, and I came away with so many ideas. And I remember then, I think, I was making regular trips, I think, to the US. Certainly before all of our borders shut, I think I was going, once, twice a year for sure. But I was just absolutely amazed. And I remember my partner Ross saying to me, well, if you enjoy it, I'll come with you next time. It took a few more trips than that, because I came back and I went, I love it. It's amazing. Like, it's wonderful. But he's been with me now. Like, we've been together a few times now to the US. So this is where you go. Now, what was the question, Ryan? Right. So, all right. So amongst that, I think over time we had, I hosted Terry Ryan to come over to Australia and do her coaching people to train dogs workshop. And at that time, we had a lot of interest. We had that in Adelaide, and we had a lot of interest for people to, after that, to do the Karen Pryor Academy professional course, which had launched around 2009, I think. And so this was 2010. And so we had enough interest in KPA, again, were ahead of their time and very flexible and willing to have Terry Ryan come over to Australia to do a course here. And anyway, sadly, it fell through. In the end, there was me who was a definite student to do the course. And so I said, well, can I just, transfer my registration and do the World program? So that's what I did. So in 2011, I went off and did the program, studied here, and then did the program with Terry Ryan in Squim for the workshop. And so that was my introduction to KPA. And then I hosted Terry the next year to do chicken camps. So we did the first chicken training camps here in Australia. And I guess I just kept on turning up in America. And continuing to learn more and study and train chickens and so and over those times I did have the wonderful privilege of meeting Karen Pryor and I went to Clicker Expos and did all of those things. And then I was invited to become a KPA faculty member and then went through that sort of process of going through and started the first teaching the first workshops here in 2015. So I'm not sure if it's just that I kept turning up, Ryan, or...
Yeah, you became part of the antecedents of...
Here she is again.
The conference. How?
And the same, I think, with, Veronica. I just kept on turning up. I remember seeing her at the first conference back in 2007 when I was there and looking at all the dog beers products and, and thinking they are so helpful, but they are so expensive. And now I think, wow, it's just the time, it's interesting how your perspective change. You think, wow, because I did eventually, after turning up and looking at these things over the years, did eventually purchase some products and did some coaching and those sorts. And I think then you see the value in terms of how much time it saves you and, just all the benefits of the coaching and all those things. But, it's interesting. It'd just be like one of those people just here she is again looking at our stuff and never buying anything.
Well, you did buy something in the end.
Oh, I absolutely did. Yes.
The customer
quite a few things.
Customer journey for you was just a little bit longer.
That's right.
Did you bring Terry Ryan over in 2012 by any chance?
Yeah.
That's cool. So I was working at Wellington Zoo at the time, and I had no idea who Terry Ryan was. And I went to her workshop in Wellington, which must have flowed on from whatever you did. So here's a ripple that we've just connected from what you would, from all of your trips to the States. They resulted in you bringing Terry Ryan over, and I landed in a workshop with Terry Ryan. Even then, my first dog workshop was like Terry Ryan, and I didn't even know who she was. I mean, man, I've been lucky. And that's
You've been absolutely very
we can
lucky.
say that's because of you. Isn't that crazy?
That's cool.
That is nuts.
I will take credit for that.
And I remember, building a fond friendship with Terry at that time.
She is wonderful. And I will, like last Clicker Expo's on this weekend, I will go along to her Zoom sessions on, or go to her classes just because I love watching her teach.
And so that was 2010.
I've had Terry over 5 times. We did 4 chicken. I got very good at chicken. Got very good at conditioning chickens. And with the coaching people, I reckon we did, the last one was 2017, the last camps we did, because Arlo, who's now 5 coming on 6, came to the first, he was allowed to come to chicken camp because he was 8 weeks old.
So where did your current, and tell me if I'm wrong, your current project, the thing that takes up most of your time, UnChased, how did that come?
Well, this is actually fortuitous in terms of how this conversation's going, because that's actually how ultimately UnChased came about, because during this time, so I was doing the KPA, I was hosting the first sort of chicken camps, and I had adopted a Aussie Shepherd called Marnie. Well, it wasn't her name at the time. Her name was Flirt. and she was an ex-breeding bitch. So she was just about to turn 6, and I got her, and the breeder said to me, it wasn't the breeder of her, long story anyway, dog, these dogs get from one place to another, but anyway, she ended up fairly locally here, and the breeder said to me, because I said, oh, well, I've got, chickens coming, we're doing chicken training, and I had a rabbit, was my KA, I adopted a rabbit for the KPA second species, and she said, oh, well, good luck with that, she chases. So it's like, okay. So Marnie came to live here, and we had chickens coming and we had a rabbit. And I had this dog that was known for her ability to be chased. And the woman they had chickens there that she would chase. So I thought, oh, okay, well, I'm going to have some training to do. So I set around doing some training and working on some plans and things. And so that was my start of it, because what I then discovered was, okay, here we are. He's a 6-year-old dog that we've gone from chasing chickens to, having chickens here. And after chicken camp, we kept some, and they all went off to good homes, by the way, if anyone's wondering what happened to them. They're all pets, but I kept a few here, and it's nice to have them free ranging when they can, so that's what we still do today. And Oscar the rabbit, because this is how wonderful my partner is, said, gosh, you've got to do all this training with this rabbit, and again, he was an adult rescue, entire male. Well, he better come and live inside the house so you can create this relationship quicker, so you can do some training. So Oscar came and it lived inside the house. It was like, okay. And so I went from having this dog who was, Aussie Shepherd, very keen on chasing and working on building these relationships with them all, and being really successful with that. So having, them all being happy to, free range in the yard, and having Oscar and her and my other Aussie Shepherd at the time, Brody, just, all chilled out and lying on mats together inside the house. And I thought, oh, well, this worked. So at the time, in terms of, by this time here I am sort of 10 years into my training business. And because I work in a semi-rural area, we have a lot of hobby farms, so a lot of people with horses. We have a lot of sheep and cows. We have a lot of kangaroos. We have a lot of koalas, possums. And we have a lot of working breeds, a lot of terriers coming to classes. And so whilst we were doing some, training that was helpful, we weren't doing anything specific. And from 2007, I'd been doing workshops. One of the things that had come out of my trip to the States, and actually just before I went, was I had been in touch with Leslie Nielsen, who was the really reliable recall person who sort of wrote that sort of program. And I remember emailing her and saying, wow, I love this, can I use the title? And she very generously said yes, and I was fortunate enough to meet her as well in 2007 at APDT. And so I started running workshops which were topic specific back then, and they were successful. I sort of branched out and been doing other workshops just around, walking on a loose lead and polite greetings with other dogs and people. And so the workshops were going really well. And I thought after all of this, well, we have a lot of clients whose dogs are chasing, and we're not really addressing them as well as we could. There was a lot of management, which is very important, and not saying throw that away, but that was sort of like our solution, as it were, was really just around managing the antecedents. And here I thought, well, hang on a minute, I've just sort of successfully done this with an older dog with a history of chasing, and maybe I'll put together a program and I'll start running a workshop. So that's what I did. And so I ran the first workshop in 2012, and then just went, popular and went well. And so it's really sort of gone from there. And I think it has just been really successful. Like, so clients would see really good success. And then we had clients who would want to come along with their puppy because they had they had border collie or whatever, and they were identifying, perhaps my breed's more inclined to be chasing. And so I developed a puppy UnChased program program because I really wanted to think, wow, this is fantastic that people want to train their puppies before they start chasing. And so, I created that, and really our workshop wasn't suitable. The poor puppies would just fall asleep, after an hour or so, which at least they were having a calm time, but it wasn't really, ideal. So it sort of branched out. And then what I also noticed was other trainers would just, if they found I had a client with chase behaviours, they go, oh, go see Alexis. And so I would have referrals from other trainers, and I really enjoyed working with those dogs and the clients and that group. So I thought, gosh, well, it'd be really good just to share this program wider. And so I had already been planning before 2020 to develop online courses. And so for me, when we were suddenly all locked down, it was a good opportunity to actually have that go ahead and create those courses, which is what I did, and then develop an instructor's course. So now the current program for UnChased is that there is a series of online courses for anyone who wants to work with their dog, and so they're sort of specified in terms of rural dog, urban dog, dogs and cats, and pocket pets, and then also in terms of an UnChased snakes program, which is snake avoidance, and then a instructor's course, so the pro trainer course, which is for qualified experienced instructors who really want to gain more skills and knowledge in the area of chase behaviours, and also then can look at taking on a license so that they can use the name, and they've got all the branded products ready. So they've got a whole range of things there, just like DogBiz has for a whole range of things that they can work with and not have to spend extra time on. And I think one of the really valuable things that's come out of that is community. A community of trainers who are supportive and who we can share ideas and experiences on the topic of chase behaviours, and so really creating ongoing education and support as well in that community. So it's not just here you go, off you go now, that it really is a nice sort of supportive network.
Awesome to learn about the evolution of that program, and we're going to talk more about it in episode 2 with Alexis. One thing you mentioned there that I know the audience of this podcast show and the wider audience of Animal Training Academy are interested in is snake aversion, and you mentioned you have one of your offerings is related to that. Can you share more about that for our listeners?
Yes, so UnChased Snakes is a snake avoidance program. It is so there's a recorded online course, which again people can just sort of work through and follow. It is, and there is then online. So at the moment I'm running a live online class as well. So it's sort of a guided program, and I do in-person training. One of the other things that I'm doing as well at the moment is we cover the snake avoidance protocol in the Pro Trainer course. And what I find is people either live in an area with snakes or they don't. However, having said that, we are adapting the protocol for other animals. So, for example, my points are going sort of together here. So, in terms of the snakes protocol is very much those of you who are familiar as well with Ken Ramirez, and there are other trainers doing them. I did say to Ken a couple of years ago, I wish I'd known it was years ago that he had a program that he was doing, because I would have just gone to him rather than trying to figure out how to do this myself. However, it runs, as it turns out, in a very similar sort of way, which is ultimately we're teaching, as we do with a lot of the UnChased program, is we're teaching the triggers to be cues. And so for the snakes, we're really teaching the dog encounters a snake, whether that's an odour or movement, that they have that as a cue to do other behaviours. And so we're usually just teaching the dog to return to a person and alert them of that. And so that's the program that I do. Ken does an extra bit on his that some clients will go to, and I refer to him if people want to do that, which is having a self-enclosed closed sort of kennel and finding having a different behaviour at the end of that. But for me and the clients that I'm working with, and for most people, just having them return to a person and alert, people are usually around, they're on their hikes or walks, or, it's at home when it's happening. And so I find that meets the majority of needs. And so whilst I teach that in the Pro Trainer course, and how to run the program and how to teach that, what I find is, because it is not something that trainers have done previously, even though the behaviours we're working on are recall and an alert behaviour, the context in which they occur changes the picture. And so what I'm actually doing at the moment is I'm finding it's helpful to do extra training in that area for people to have the confidence to train it and to just run through that with their own dogs, so that they can experience it for themselves. And so I'm also running a couple of those classes at the moment for trainers. And we're in the middle of that at the moment. I've got a class tonight. It's so much fun. It's so cool to be working with other trainers. And what we're also doing with that is we've got trainers from, the UK and States, as well as Australia and New Zealand. And we're looking at, so a number of trainers are working on snakes, but some of them we're looking at adapting the protocol, and where we need to make those changes, and they're trying it out with other animals. So, for example, skunks. It's not pleasant if a dog, goes up and harasses a skunk to the point where they get sprayed. And so really looking at, this could be useful, in those situations. And so we've got a trainer working with foxes, one with raccoons, one with skunks. April is doing some kiwi, so looking at doing the program with kiwi. And so it's and we'll I'll work on some new handouts and stuff, and coming up with how we can make those changes, and what we need to change and adapt. And so that's been a really fabulous process to be going through as well. But I think it is just, I know one of your aims is always around trainers and looking at building confidence, and I think some of this is really just to be able to work together, to be able to hash out ideas, to be in a community where it's safe to be sharing and experiencing these things, and to be working through our own dogs, to play around with it and see how it all comes together, and to then have that confidence to be able to go out and teach it. And so what I'm really hoping as well out of all of this is that we have more trainers globally to be teaching, snake avoidance using positive reinforcement. And again, I think, at the moment there are, few of us, and we are so inundated when we put something out there that it is harder to find information on the internet about it, because, and so sometimes people aren't aware that there are options there for them. And so hopefully, one of my goals is, if we can get more trainers working in this space and having confidence to do it, then it will become easier for people to find information, which sort of goes back to where we started in the very beginning of the podcast, about just being able to get the information to know that there are other ways, and this is an opportunity. And as I, have the great fortune as well to be teaching the Karen Pryor Academy, one of the things that I always notice is that I encourage people, and the same with UnChased, to be connecting with other trainers and to go off and to be visiting classes. And one of the things that always comes out is, wow, I didn't think they'd let me go along and watch their classes. Or, it's just like, no, people will welcome you. This is a wonderful community of people who want to share. There is so much work out there. There are so many people. There are so many dogs. There are so many chickens and rabbits and other animals. We need more trainers. We need great trainers to, have the confidence and have the experience, and to be able to share and pass on knowledge and ideas to create this community, so that we can keep expanding it and, inviting other people in, and to, just to be really able to, to be able to share. And so I think this is really the nice thing about all of these programs and your community as well, is that these are really good spaces for people to be able to share and gain more knowledge and experience.
Well, awesome. You've just shared about your snake aversion program of about 4,000 to 5,000 people. So that's
cool.
going to ripple out across the world as those people tell people and those people tell people. Hey, Alexis, to wrap up part one, can you just share with everyone listening where they can go online to find these programs, find out about you, get in touch? Where are you hanging out online?
It is very easy. It is UnChased.com.
Everything there. Are you on TikTok?
I am not on TikTok.
I laugh because I don't think I'm not on TikTok.
I am on Facebook and I am on Instagram, but the website will have links for those things as well. And no, it's really interesting. I can't recall who I was talking to, but it seems that as older age groups move to Facebook and then to Instagram and now to TikTok, the younger people keep creating new platforms so that they can have it to themselves. So I think I've probably missed TikTok because I think it's already moved on.
Yeah, I'm still trying to learn Instagram myself. So.
Yeah, me too, Ryan.
And we will, of course, link to all of that in the show notes as well. Hey, Alexis, gratitude to you for sharing everything with us so far. We love hearing about people's behavioural odysseys, as we like to call them. So thank you for sharing. We will wrap this up now for part one, but we will be joined, as mentioned, by Alexis in our subsequent episode where she will draw from her broad experience and knowledge base to share 5 ways you can increase your confidence if you have a dog that likes to chase. I can't wait. For now, though, Alexis, this has been so much fun. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to hang out with us at Animal Training Academy.
Thank you so much, Ryan. It's been an emotional journey, but it's been wonderful to be here.
We do, of course, really appreciate all of you tuning in today as well. And if you have enjoyed this episode and you were interested in carrying on the conversation about working with our animals in the most positive, funnest, choice-rich ways, then as mentioned at the start of this episode, the Animal Training Academy community is waiting for you. Head on over to www.animaltrainingacademy.com and click on the membership button in the main menu to learn more about what members are describing as the Netflix social media platform for behaviour geeks. That's it for this episode though. We're going to wrap it up there. Thanks again so much everyone for listening. You'll hear from us again soon.